who were concerned about this proposal and felt very strongly about it, and I would like to go around and ask them in turn whether they feel that they could live with this proposed amendment, whether it is an acceptable way forward to them, and that whether we can find consensus here. But I see already that Bolivia have requested the floor, so I give the floor to you, Bolivia.
Muy buenos días, señor presidente. Pedirle, como Bolivia, y a nombre de las más de 20 naciones indígenas y aproximadamente las 50 familias que de ellas conforman, se considere la conformación de un grupo de trabajo para un análisis a detalle, con la participación de los proponentes, desde luego, tanto Panamá, Colombia, Unión Europea, y también invitarlos a los compañeros del Reino Unido, Estados Unidos y los demás países que conforman esta COP, como también los países que tienen sus bosques bajo plan de manejo sostenible, como Brasil, Ecuador, Perú, y bueno, buscarle una solución plausible y a corto plazo para estos pueblos indígenas, porque estos serían los más afectados con un cambio de uso de bosque y de repente estaríamos forcejeando la desaparición de estas culturas. Entendemos que los países de Sudamérica valoramos mucho la identidad cultural de nuestros pueblos indígenas, por ende tenemos que cuidarlos, ya que los mismos hacen parte de lo que es la identidad y la biodiversidad de los bosques, hacen una simbiosis con el mismo. Por eso vuelvo a pedirle con mucho respeto y consideración que se nos tome en cuenta para realizar un grupo de trabajo y hacer un análisis a detalle para sacar un resultado más, de repente, que venga a conllevar la realidad de estos pueblos y desde luego aprovechar también la participación de los cooperantes para que de repente vengan a colaborar a la implementación de esta propuesta. Nada más, señor presidente, agradecerles y esperando que sea aceptada esta moción, le agradezco. Que tenga un buen día.
Thank you, Bolivia, and I note your request. I will go around and get the views of other parties as well first, so I can form a kind of bigger picture, really, of where things are headed. So I give the floor to Peru, followed by Brazil.
Sí, gracias, señor presidente. Agradecemos a los coproponentes por la propuesta presentada el día de hoy. Sin embargo, deseamos persistir en el plazo que propusimos ayer, de 24 meses, y quisiéramos compartir con todas las partes qué es lo que esto implica, ¿no? Este plazo implica una adecuada gestión presupuestal, la actualización de normas y lineamientos, como por ejemplo lineamientos silviculturales, incremento del diámetro mínimo de corta, tener lineamientos respecto al manejo de la regeneración natural y al ciclo de corta de estas especies. Asimismo, desarrollar una campaña de comunicación adecuada con los actores, porque tal como lo mencionó Bolivia, hay muchas comunidades y actores, poblaciones locales involucradas en el manejo de esta especie, ¿no? Un punto que también es muy importante y un desafío para las partes y que está también mencionado en la propuesta de inclusión es el tema de la identificación de especies. Perú, como lo anotamos ayer, ha hecho un estudio genético para determinar las especies que se distribuyen en nuestro país. Esto nos permitió, por ejemplo, evidenciar que solo tenemos 3 especies, ¿no? Micranta, férrea y charapilla. Sin embargo, es necesario desarrollar claves para la identificación dendrológica, es decir, de los árboles que van a ser inventariados, y también para la identificación anatómica de la madera, lo cual toma y requiere un tiempo prudente para que sea un trabajo científico y muy bien hecho. Asimismo, también queríamos precisar que el Perú desarrolla sus dictámenes de extracción no perjudicial usando la guía de 9 pasos elaborada por Traffic y la Autoridad Científica de Alemania. Entonces, esto y la aplicación de esta guía nos demanda tener información confiable sobre las poblaciones de las especies. Entonces, y buscar mucha información también asociada a otros temas, ¿no? A temas de manejo, de implementación, de control, ¿no? Y por otro lado, la autoridad administrativa va a tener que implementar en campo una serie de verificaciones que actualmente no las lleva a cabo, ¿no? Entonces, todo esto para Perú, como uno de los principales países que está haciendo aprovechamiento de la especie, requiere tiempo, ¿no? Nosotros reconocemos la importancia de conservación del árbol de Chihuahuaco como un árbol que cumple un rol ecológico muy importante en los ecosistemas forestales, ¿no? Es un árbol que es hábitat de muchas especies, pero también para hacer esto se requiere hacerlo con responsabilidad y de una manera adecuada, por lo cual consideramos que el plazo solicitado ayer de 24 meses sería lo mínimo para poder abarcarnos en este trabajo, ¿no? Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Peru. I will give the floor to Brazil. You have the floor, and I see a request from the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. And good morning to all. We appreciate the effort made by the proponents in trying to adapt their proposal, particularly when excluding CITES from the annotation. However, the proposal is not acceptable for Brazil. I will refrain from repeating the arguments I set out yesterday, but I need to remember that Brazil has a firm position in the sense that the genus does not meet the requirements for inclusion in Appendix 2. Finally, we want to express support for the proposal made by Bolivia for the creation of a work group on this proposal, where the parties can promote a broad debate on dipteryx. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I will give the floor to the United Kingdom, and then I will maybe come back to the proponents for their reflections on this request for a working group. But the United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UK still has strong reservations that an 18 or 24-month delay of implementation will have negative consequences for the species, but also sets a dangerous precedent for future species listings. The UK believes that prior to the COP, consultation between co-proponents and range states could have mitigated some of these issues. We would encourage range states, if they're expecting to have implementation issues, to explore other support offered by the Secretariat, such as the Compliance Assistance Programme, to aid in the implementation of this or any other species listing. We would like any delay to be limited to no more than 12 months, in line with previous decisions of the COP, for example, relating to Drella species listing at 18, but would be happy to join any future working group as proposed by Bolivia to discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. So yesterday in debate, we heard, as I said, opposition from Brazil, Bolivia, Peru, and also Guyana. So I'd quite like to hear from Guyana, if they're in the room, if they have anything to say, any reflections on the amended proposal by the proponents, by Colombia. Guyana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would want to align myself with the comments made by the UK just now. Guyana still has a problem supporting the proposal, even in its amended form.
Thank you. I see a request for the floor from India, so I'll give the floor to you, and then I will try and come up with a way forward, but I may go back to the proponents soon about that. So India, you have the floor.
In recent COPs, we have observed a trend of proposals to be list entire genera of plant species on the appendices based on the lookalike criteria, as opposed to the individual species. Chair, we would like to emphasize that this approach is neither reasonable nor fair. The range states of several of the world's plant diversity are developing countries, and the sustainable use of plant species has a crucial role to play in the development aspirations of their populations. The listing of entire genera of plants results in CITES trade controls applying to species which are in no way threatened by trade and affects livelihoods of people with lower income in the range states, which is against the principles of equity and natural justice. Moreover, Chair, such listings may result in unsustainable utilization of other non-listed species whose conservation status may not be as favorable. Additionally, the use of such a blunt tool when so many advances have been made in science and technology points to a collective failure of the Convention to meaningfully resolve issues related to the protection of plants. Such general listings of plants relieve consumer parties of the responsibility of developing identification techniques for the products that they import and pass on the regulatory and financial burden to the exporting range states. Chair, we wish to emphasize here that wildlife and forests of India are our national treasure, and their protection is ingrained in our cultural and social and religious ethos. Our wildlife and forest laws are amongst the strictest in the world. We have always been supported of providing CITES protection for the species which deserve it and continue to do so. However, we do not support the listing of the non-threatened plant species based on the lookalike criteria unless the parties have exhibited sufficient efforts to develop identification tools for the species which individually qualify for being listed in Appendix 2. The use of such listings would result in alienation of local communities and erosion of trust in the Convention. Today, our communities are suffering from the consequences of this approach. More parties will have the same problem if this continues. We do not believe that such an approach is tenable in the long run. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India, and I take it you're making a general point, which is perhaps broader than this proposal alone. If you just give me a moment while I consider the best way forward. I think 1 moment. So yes, I did say that I would go back to the co-proponents and ask them, based on what they've heard from the parties here and the various suggestions, if they had a preference for a way forward. So, European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to all parties that have raised their voice, and we respect all positions, of course, very much. Still, we believe that the listing criteria are met and the species or the genus desires a listing on Appendix 2. I think there was consensus that the deletion of CITES is agreed. On the question of the delay, while we share the concerns of the UK, we believe that in this case, if range states really strongly believe that this delay is needed for implementation, we could facilitate that and accept a delay of 24 months.
So thank you, delegates, for all your thoughts on this. I see that parties are sort of suggesting further discussions, but I also hope that after the session was suspended last night, there would have been some of those discussions to see if there was a combined way forward, or a consensus on a way forward. It doesn't seem to me that there is a consensus. It seems to me that there is still opposition to this proposal. So my intention, I think, is to try and determine this proposal now and put it to a vote. Clearly, I don't want to keep deferring agenda items, endlessly waiting for things to happen that might not be the case. And so that is my intention, but I'm just going to make sure that because we've got various amendments proposed that we do this, I get everything correctly. So I will come back to you very shortly. One moment. So before I move forward, I forgot when making my announcements at the start of this session to invite the chair of the Credentials Committee to give us an update on credentials, and that's clearly an important issue when we come to a vote. So if the chair of the Credentials Committee, could we give the floor to Morocco? I hope she's here.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le comité s'est réuni ce matin pour la vérification des lettres de créance qui sont parvenues au secrétariat et il a approuvé de nouvelles lettres de créance. La situation, donc, aujourd'hui, ce matin précisément, est de 151 parties qui sont présentes.
One moment, please. We're not getting English translation on the front desk here, so could we resolve that? Yes? Working now? Okay, Morocco, if you want to continue probably from the start, please, because I think a lot of people might have missed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais répéter. Donc, le comité s'est réuni ce matin pour vérifier les lettres de créance qui sont parvenues au secrétariat et de nouvelles lettres ont été approuvées. La situation, donc, aujourd'hui est de...
Now, one moment. The English translation isn't working.
Spanish is good. Spanish
Non,
is
pas
good.
la traduction.
No?
Spanish is good, but I can
Spanish,
hear you.
French? Well, it's French. English is not working. So we'll just wait a moment until we sort out the translation.
La traduction. عندهم مشكل في الترادكسيون.
Chair, the English interpretation should be working now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, interpreters, and yes, we can hear you now and on the English channel. So, Chair of the Credentials Committee, with apologies, if you could start again, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, le comité s'est réuni ce matin pour vérifier les lettres de créance qui sont parvenues au secrétariat. La situation actuelle est de 151 parties qui sont présentes et 141 lettres de créance acceptées. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair of the Credentials Committee. Just let me get my papers in order. So we're about to start the voting procedure. So during the voting procedure, we can't have delegates walking around here and no observers in the part of the room which is reserved for delegates. As we go, once the vote is open, for the 40 seconds that it is open, then there are no photographs allowed of the delegates area. Once the vote is over and the results are displayed on the screen, then of course you can take photos. So I ask all delegates to take your seats ready for the vote. Once I start the voting procedure, we won't be allowing people to wander around. So please take your seats and be ready for the vote. So this is a vote for proposal number 48. It has been amended so that seeds are removed from the annotation, and it now complies with annotation #17. And the proposal would be annotated that entry into effect of the inclusion in Appendix 2 would be delayed by 24 months. The voting is by a normal vote, and the vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the European Union. This is a vote on a substantive matter, and so it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. If you vote yes, you are voting in favor of the proposal, and if you vote no, you are voting against it. So I'm just going to check with the technicians that everything is okay.
Chairman, we are ready to vote.
Right, so a reminder, no wandering about. Please take your seats and stay in them. Sorry, a request from the floor from Bolivia.
Nuevamente, señor presidente, buenos días. Acogiéndonos en lo que es el artículo 24, parágrafo 2, o 27, perdón, nos gustaría solicitar que el voto sea secreto, ya que debido a la complejidad del asunto, nos gustaría solicitar ese detalle. Gracias.
Thank you, Bolivia. Unfortunately, I had started the voting procedure. And once I've started the voting procedure, then I can't accept a request for a secret ballot. I gave a long indication, rather, of my intention to go to a vote. So there was ample opportunity for parties to do that. So we now move on. The technicians say everything is in order, and you have 40 seconds to cast your vote, and the ballot is
Chair,
open
not all
now.
the delegates have been seated yet in the delegate seats.
Thank you. Delegates, will you take your seats, please? So please take your seats and remain in them. So, with that, the ballot is open now. Thank you. Technicians, will you please show the results on the main screen, please? So this proposal, as amended, is recommended by this committee for adoption. This is a normal vote, so will technicians now show the individual votes of parties on the main screen, please? Okay, I think this has gone round once already, so you should all have been able to check your vote by now. So we can now move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a document 84.2, standard nomenclature for dipteryx species. This document has been submitted by the European Union and its member states. And I invite them to introduce it. European Union, you have the floor. You have the floor now, European Union. Sorry, it took a while for the mic to get to you.
Are you talking about this one? Sorry. I made it in Spanish, right? Sorry, thank you, Chair. We're just very happy here. So we're just doing a bit of moving. So thank you. So we'd like to introduce our document on standard nomenclature for dipteryx species. So I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. We note that the taxonomy of dipteryx species remains unresolved, and in order to avoid any misinterpretation of the listing, now that Proposal 48 has been adopted and the EU has submitted its document 84.2 on the standard nomenclature. This document suggests the adaptation of Carvalho et al. 2020 as the standard reference for the genus, and this is supported by the Secretariat and the nomenclature specialist of the Plants Committee. It also proposes to direct the Plants Committee to evaluate nomenclature issues related to dipteryx species and provide recommendations to CoP20. And the European Union also and its member states agreed to the minor proposed edits to the decisions by the Secretariat as outlined in the document. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. Are there any requests from the floor from other parties? I don't see any. Okay, I can invite comments from observers, if any. Oh, sorry, I see the United States. I beg your pardon. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It's not clear to us, I'm sorry, if whether they are recommending adopting the standard reference at the present meeting. Thank you.
Well, I can go back to the European Union and ask them, but that was my understanding. So EU, do you want to provide clarification?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we would suggest the adaptation of Carvalho et al. 2020 as the standard reference, and we note that this is supported by the Secretariat and the nomenclature specialist. However, we would ask the Plants Committee to evaluate the issues related to dipteryx, I think as we had some discussions on that yesterday, and provide recommendations to CoP20. So we still have time to work on the standard reference and the nomenclature for this within the Plants Committee as well. Thank you. But for the moment, yes, we would suggest this as the standard reference.
Does that clarity help you, United States? Yes? I see no other requests from the floor, so we adopt the draft decisions in document 84.2 as amended by Secretariat and the adoption of the suggested standard nomenclature. So with that, we will move on to our next agenda item. Just give me a moment to sort out my papers. So the next item on our agenda for this morning is Proposal 44 on Androanthus, Rhosiodendron, and Tabebuia species. The proponents are Colombia, the European Union, and Panama. So I invite one of the proponents to introduce this proposal. One of you care to press the button or request the floor? Panama, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Espero el resto de las partes se la estén pasando muy bien en Panamá. Bienvenidos a nuestro país. En nombre de Colombia, la Unión Europea y Panamá, tenemos el gusto de presentar la propuesta 44 para incluir en el apéndice 2 de las CITES a las especies de árboles tropicales conocidas como IP, primavera, guayacán y araguaney, de los géneros Androanthus, Tabebuia y Rhosiodendron, con la anotación número 17, que incluye troncos, madera cerrada, chapas de madera, madera contrachapada y madera transformada. Muchas de las especies se encuentran en el comercio internacional y cumplen con el criterio B, anexo 2A de la resolución CONF 9.24, Ref COP17, y las restantes cumplen con el criterio A, anexo 2B, por cuestiones de similitud de las especies y dificultad en la identificación, así como por la incertidumbre taxonómica y de nomenclatura. Algunos autores afirman que la madera de las diferentes especies de los tres géneros no puede distinguirse ni macroscópica ni microscópicamente. Los tres géneros incluyen un total de 103 especies que se distribuyen en el continente americano desde México hasta Argentina, así como en varios países en el Caribe. Las especies de Androanthus, Tabebuia y Rhosiodendron habitan en diversos tipos de vegetación, como bosques tropicales densos, bosques perennifolios y subcaducifolios medios y bajos, bosques de galería y bosques mesófilos de montaña. También están muy dispersos en formaciones secundarias y en pastizales. La lista roja de especies amenazadas de la UICN ha evaluado y clasificado 50 especies de Tabebuia, Androanthus y Rhosiodendron. Androanthus serratifolius está clasificada como en peligro a escala mundial en la lista roja de la UICN, con una tendencia poblacional decreciente debido a que está amenazada por el comercio internacional. Varias de las especies se encuentran clasificadas a nivel nacional como en peligro crítico de extinción, o amenazadas en Argentina, Brasil, Colombia, Costa Rica, México, Cuba, Haití, República Dominicana, así como en Panamá. Las especies de IP enfrentan diversas amenazas como la deforestación y la explotación forestal, los asentamientos humanos y el desarrollo agrícola. la minería, el desarrollo industrial y el desarrollo industrial de la Amazonía. La explotación forestal clandestina, los incendios y la disminución de otras especies maderables tropicales, como por ejemplo la caoba americana, que ha dado lugar a un aumento de la demanda de especies de IP. Existe un gran comercio internacional con la madera de IP. Por ejemplo, Brasil exportó entre los años 2010 y 2016 180.000 metros cúbicos de Androanthus serratifolius. El Perú exportó más de 1.000 metros cúbicos de la misma especie entre 2016 y 2018. Surinam también ha realizado exportaciones por 6.000 metros cúbicos entre 2011 y 2015. Venezuela exportó más de 29.000 metros cúbicos de Tadebuia rosea, más de 20.000 metros cúbicos de Androanthus impetigosus entre 2007 y 2017. La Guyana francesa exportó más de 16.000 metros cúbicos entre 2007 y 2021 de Androanthus serratifolius y Androanthus impetigosus. Los mayores importadores de la madera de IP son los Estados Unidos, Francia, Bélgica, China y la República Dominicana. Existe mucho comercio ilícito con el IP. Por ejemplo, en Brasil, en 2020, durante la operación IP, las autoridades de Brasil incautaron más de 130.000 metros cúbicos de madera, que equivale a unos 6.200 camiones. En Venezuela, se decomisaron más de 65.000 metros cúbicos de madera de Tadebuia rosea entre 2013 y 2018. En Perú, un análisis de 2021, dirigido por el gobierno peruano, investigó el blanqueo de madera extraída ilegalmente en las cadenas de suministro, concluyendo que aproximadamente el 37% del total de la producción nacional de madera en rollo en 2017 había sido blanqueada. Las especies de IP de los tres géneros Androanthus, Tabebuia y Rosodendron cumplen con los criterios de las CITES para ser incluidas en el apéndice 2. Exhortamos a todos los países partes de las CITES a que apoyen su inclusión para poder regular el comercio internacional y mantener la sostenibilidad de estas especies arbóreas en su medio natural. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Panama, for your introduction, and I now open the floor to parties for any comments on this proposal. I see Brazil, followed by Argentina. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the floor. And Brazil oppose Proposal 44 for similar reasons as we opposed Proposal 48. I will refrain from repeating all the reasoning I made yesterday when we debated on Proposal 48, but I would like to emphasize that in our view, there is no robust scientific data justifying the submission of these species included in this proposal to the protective regime under CITES Appendix 2. And this evaluation was made clear on the assessment by the Secretariat, which noted, and I quote, "The Secretariat notes that the supporting statement would benefit from updated biological and trade information for all species concerned, as well as strengthened species-specific trade information, as the proposal largely relies on the information available for 2 out of the 113 species covered by the 3 genera concerned." And I repeat, 2 out of 113. I want to remember that the International Timber Trade Organization also raised concerns and required more justification, including the experience of the countries, of the range states. Brazil has the biggest population in this species. The IP is a Brazilian national tree and is not threatened in our country. It's not even in the verge of becoming threatened. Moreover, as it happens to dipteryx, our exportations of IP, timber, almost all of our exportations come from sustainable management projects approved and monitored by our government. Therefore, trade is not contributing to the decline of dipteryx of IP population in our country. Quite the opposite. I remember sustainable management projects are part of our policy to avoid, to keep the forest up, to avoid deforestation. When we create new bureaucratic and barriers to trade, and when we increase costs, we are disencouraging these projects. We are allowing for people who live in the forest try to look for other ways of surviving. And we are talking about, in many cases, traditional communities, indigenous people. I would also remember that Brazil has our information control and management systems can be considered to be among the most robust in the world. All of our control and management systems are digital now. So our country is well equipped to declare, to say that the wood that comes from, the Ipe woods that we export it comes out, almost all of them comes from the sustainable management program, sorry. And finally, we would like to remind that we are creating a new burden to our CITES authorities and risking divert efforts and resources which would otherwise be focused on species that are effectively under some threat of extinction to controlling EPs which aren't endangered in our country. So I'm sorry for being so quick, but what we would like is to urge parties to consider range stage perspectives on these species and to oppose this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I give the floor to Argentina, followed by Bolivia.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. En principio, Argentina quiere agradecer a los proponentes de esta propuesta y comentarles que en Argentina tienen distribución especies solo de los géneros Androanthus y Tabebuia. En relación con esta propuesta, Argentina ha evaluado la misma teniendo en cuenta el estatus de conservación de las especies pertenecientes a estos géneros en Argentina, así como también lo relacionado a su comercio interno y externo. En este sentido, se considera pertinente y oportuno apoyar la inclusión en el apéndice 2 de la Convención CITES de los géneros Androanthus, Rhosiodendron y Tabebuia como medida para garantizar en toda el área de distribución la sostenibilidad, asegurando el control de su comercio. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Argentina. I give the floor to Bolivia.
Bueno, gracias, señor presidente, por la palabra nuevamente. Expresar que la propuesta 44 es similar a la 48, perjudica mucho lo que son los pueblos indígenas, pueblos originarios. Recordarles a ustedes que, bueno, el mundo nos ve, y vuelvo a recalcar, los pueblos indígenas hacen parte de la biodiversidad, del conjunto de los bosques. Si no los protegemos, si los obligamos a cambiar de rubro o de repente migrar a las ciudades, quizás mañana o pasado tendremos una reducción de forma grave de los pueblos indígenas. De repente muchos de acá presentes han conocido o visitan nuestros países y uno de los atractivos, desde luego, es visitar nuestros pueblos indígenas. Insto a que de repente haya una responsabilidad y ver la realidad de cada uno de los lugares, de cada uno de los países, para tomar una decisión y no tomar en cuenta de repente algunos países donde sí, desde luego deben estar sufriendo este tipo de amenazas. No es el caso de Bolivia. Tenemos un manejo sostenible, maderable, con bosques bajo planes de manejo y desde luego respetando todas las normas actuales. Vuelvo a recalcar, el país que les habla es uno de los pocos que tiene la ley de la madre tierra, derechos de la madre tierra, pero desde luego respetando a los pueblos que en ella residen. Entonces, insto a las partes a tomar en cuenta ese detalle. Gracias.
Thank you, Bolivia. I'll give the floor to Peru, and then Colombia have requested the floor. So Peru and then Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente. En principio, agradecemos a los países que han hecho posible esta propuesta. Y en relación al Perú, tenemos que señalar que, de acuerdo con el análisis realizado por la FAO, de las 35 especies de Handrodautus y 76 especies de tabebuya, gran cantidad de estas se encuentran clasificadas como de preocupación menor o casi amenazadas. Cabe indicar que el Perú no cuenta con un comercio internacional significativo de estas especies y que el comercio nacional se encuentra bastante limitado también. Se recomienda que las partes puedan enfocar sus esfuerzos en las especies que realmente necesitan de las regulaciones CITES para evitar que el comercio internacional sea una amenaza para su supervivencia, pues la inclusión de demasiadas especies podría generar una carga adicional para las autoridades CITES que no ayudará a los objetivos de la Convención. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Peru. I'll give the floor to Colombia. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Para nuestro país, el aprovechamiento de algunas especies del género Androanthus y tabebuya se ha reportado con volúmenes importantes, lo que evidencia su creciente importancia comercial. De igual manera, la pérdida de bosques debido a la expansión de la frontera agrícola y pecuaria y las incautaciones por tráfico ilegal de estas especies deben ser consideradas. Agradecemos a nuestros coproponentes y quisiéramos resaltar que en Colombia, justamente esta reducción de fragmentos de bosque destinados al uso agrícola y ganadero de uno de los ecosistemas más restringidos y amenazados como lo es el bosque seco, debe ser considerado. En Colombia, tabebuya palustris y tabebuya striata son consideradas como especies amenazadas y en nuestro país entre 2019 y 2021 más de 20.000 metros cúbicos, cerca del 80%, fue de Androanthus vivergi. Tenemos incautaciones que documentan más de 61.000 metros cúbicos y por esta razón exhortamos a las partes a que consideren la inclusión de estas especies. Gracias.
European Union, you're requesting the floor. I will always, with any proposal, always come back to the proponents at the end of a debate, just for their reflections. But European Union, if you want to speak, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm speaking on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Just to reiterate that Handranthus ceratifoliosus is listed as globally endangered by IUCN, and Handranthus impetigonosus is assessed as near threatened. We believe that the threat criteria is definitely met, and of course there is a huge volume in trade, so we don't see why the criteria would not be met in this case. This is our comment on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union. I will invite, there are no further requests from parties at the moment, so I'll invite any interventions from observers. Right, I see SSN, then the International Wood Products Association. So SSN, you have the floor.
Sí. Muchísimas gracias, señor presidente. A nombre del Species Survival Network, Defenders of Wildlife, Center for International Environmental Law and Environmental Investigation Agency, nos gustaría agradecer a los proponentes, Panamá, Colombia y la Unión Europea, por presentar esta excelente propuesta. Se trata de un ejemplo en el que tanto los estados del área de distribución como los países importadores reconocen una amenaza y trabajan juntos para combatirla, protegiendo una serie de especies en peligro y regulando su comercio internacional. La aceptación de esta propuesta permitirá a los países del área de distribución lograr un uso verdaderamente sostenible de estas especies y garantizar su conservación a través del proceso de certificación de permisos CITES. Esto va a fortalecer las propias regulaciones nacionales de cada uno de los países del área de distribución. Los géneros Androanthus, Tabebulla y Rhosiodendron están ampliamente distribuidos en la región de América Latina y el Caribe, incluyendo además México y los Estados Unidos. Muchas especies de este género son endémicas de un solo país. Las especies de varios países están clasificadas en peligro de extinción y en peligro crítico o amenazadas. Los productos de madera de estas especies son muy difíciles de distinguir a nivel macroscópico. Como hemos escuchado en la propuesta de Dipteryx, hay incluso confusión con las especies de Dipteryx. Las pruebas son sólidas de que las especies objeto de esta propuesta cumplen ampliamente con los criterios del apéndice 2 marcados en la resolución 924. Incluirlas en la lista a nivel de género no va a prohibir el comercio, sino que por el contrario ayudará a garantizar que puedan comercializarse de forma sostenible y sobre todo de manera legal, contribuyendo a que estas especies sigan existiendo para las futuras generaciones. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, SSN. I give the floor to the International Wood Products Association.
Thank you. I'm making this intervention on behalf of the International Wood Products Association. A number of studies, both current and forthcoming, map millions of adult ipe trees in Brazilian forests alone. Two examples are the recent studies by Embrapa on the occurrence of ipe in Mato Grosso and Acre, which mapped more than 40 million adult trees of the species, as well as a soon-to-be-released Embrapa study on the occurrence of ipe in Para, concluded that, and I quote here, the possibility of including the species mentioned in CITES Appendix 2 with the justification that legal forest management activities pose a threat to the ipe is contrary to all the technical knowledge that underlies the current legislation based on the sustainability of the activity, considering that the idea that the native forest management is the main activity that guarantees forest conservation and biodiversity is widely disseminated, end quote. The current incidence of ipe, when combined with current knowledge of the growth and structure of the species, carrying capacity of the forest environment, stock of natural forest under management, and reproductive maturity, indicates that treat in ipe is not detrimental to its survival. It's also worth noting what the International Tropical Timber Organization notes in CoP19 document 89.3A4, and I quote, "Trade statistics presented in the proposal are not up to date. The proposal should include trade data for at least the past 10 years and should correctly indicate the major species in international trade. The proposal should describe how international trade has impacted the conservation of the species and substantiate if such trade is a threat to their wild populations." End quote. Parties should also consider the positions of some of the primary exporting parties. Some of those have spoken here today, including Brazil and Bolivia, which have to date not indicated support for the proposal. In summary, IWPA is hopeful that parties will oppose adoption. If this is passed, IWPA would strongly recommend an implementation period of at least 24 months, similar to Kumru, As listing Ipe will have huge impacts on trade, and the volume of trade will create a significant burden on the regulatory authorities tasked with implementation. Thank you for the opportunity to share our perspective.
Thank you, International Wood Products Association, and we note your suggestion, but such a proposal needs to come from parties. I could go back to the proponents for their reflections, but what I've heard is clearly that there are a number of parties that feel strongly against this proposal, but from the limited interventions from the rest of the floor, but recognizing clearly a significant number of parties were co-proponents. It seems to me that the kind of bulk of opinion is probably in favor. So I would like to go back to those parties that expressed their opposition to see if they want to block consensus or whether they feel they could live with this proposal as it stands. Thank you. So Bolivia, then Brazil. I welcome your reflections. Thank you.
Bueno, muy buenos días nuevamente. Ya que veo que la suerte está lanzada, de repente nos gustaría que la implementación se dé en los 24 meses y desde luego si fuera posible que los proponentes acepten que tengamos un grupo de trabajo para que nuevamente analicemos, pero de cualquier forma indicarles que, bueno, los recursos son insuficientes y esperamos el apoyo de los amigos de Bolivia para que podamos implementarlo en el tiempo similar a la anterior propuesta de 24 meses. Eso sería una sugerencia y espero que los proponentes y las partes lo tomen en cuenta. Gracias.
So, Bolivia, as I understand your proposal, you are suggesting an amendment with a delay of 24 months, as we had on the previous proposal. And you're also looking for a working group and clearly technical support if the proposal was adopted. But Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start with the amendment proposed by Bolivia to say that if approved, Brazil would support this 24 months delay in the implementation. However, we are not in the position to support the proposal. The many data has been brought about demonstrating that this species, the Ipe, is not threatened in our country, which has the biggest population of the species. And moreover, as we've been emphasizing, trade is not detrimental to the species in our experience. On the contrary, when we are giving the message that, if approved, we would be sending the message that some of our national policies aimed at the conservation of the forest are not encouraged. So we still do not support the proposal. Thank you.
I see a request on the floor from the United Kingdom. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As outlined in the previous proposal, number 48, the UK has strong reservations and concerns that a 24-month delayed implementation will have negative consequences for these three genera, as well as other timber listings. And so we would support this proposal, but as it was originally proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. But there has been an amendment proposal by Bolivia that was supported by Brazil. And Brazil, at least, has indicated that they are not willing to go along with the consensus. And so I think the only way forward is to vote again on this proposal. And as the amendment proposal reduces the scope or is less restrictive than the original proposal, then that is the one that we need to consider first. So I could ask the proponents if they wish to offer any reflections, but otherwise I'm intending to go to a vote. So, okay, I see a request from Canada. Do you wish to speak? You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Canada, like the UK, also has concerns with the amendment proposed by Bolivia and the the movement towards having a 24-month delay. Canada has heard your summary, Chair, and we understand that therefore a decision first needs to be made on the amendment as was agreed in Rule 25.5. So if we move to a vote, we would seek clarity on if we are voting on whether or not to accept the amendment first. Thank you, Chair.
So that's a good question, Canada, and we're just going to consult and make sure that we get things right in relation to the rules of procedure. Thank you. So thank you, Canada, for your intervention. A very helpful one. We need to make sure we get the now amended rules of procedure correct. So in this case, I should clarify that there is a proposed amendment by Brazil and Bolivia which reduces the scope. How we're going to vote now under Rule 25.5 is to agree if the amended proposal should, in effect, supersede the original proposal. And it is, therefore, a procedural matter requiring a simple majority. So that is the issue that we are going to vote on. And depending on the outcome of that vote, we would then decide the proposal with or without an amendment. So just give me a moment. I see the request from the floor, Panama, and I'll come back to you in a moment, but I just want to ask the European Union on a procedural matter like this. It's not clear from your information document how you would vote. Will you be voting as the delegation of the European Union, or will you be voting individually by member states?
Thank you, Chair. And in this case, it's a procedural matter. It would be the member states.
Thank you, European Union. I now give the floor to Panama.
Gracias, presidente. Queremos que todas las partes, igual que nosotros, estar seguros de que la votación que viene ahora es la votación con una menor ambición y no la propuesta original, por la que le invitamos a las partes a tomar eso en consideración y que la presidencia también lo aclare.
So thank you, Panama. It is good, the rules have changed for this conference of the parties, so we do need to be clear. So the vote that we're now going to do is a procedural vote, and it is to decide whether the amendment proposed by Bolivia and supported by Brazil should supersede the original proposal. If the vote is carried, then that is the proposal that we will then put to a substantive vote, which would then require a 2/3 majority. So that's, and of course, if the vote doesn't pass, then the proposal isn't amended, and we vote on the original proposal as it stands. So I hope that's clear, and parties understand that, but the European Union are requesting the floor.
Thank you, Chair, but you explained exactly what I was had intended to ask you. Thank you.
Right. Okay, I see Brazil down with the United States. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brazil would like a clarification on procedural matters. In this case, if we have a proposal and an amendment to the proposal which is, in our view, less restrictive, has least restrictive effect on trade, shouldn't be applied. Rule 25.6 of the Rules of Procedure of the Conference of the Parties to start voting on the proposal with which have the less restrictive effect on the trade, namely the original proposal with the amendment proposed by Bolivia.
So yes, Brazil, we would take a least restrictive approach first, but under Rule 25.5, it says any representative, any delegate can make a proposed amendment to a proposal to reduce its scope or make it more precise, and as chair I can allow discussion of that. But the amended rule now goes on to say if consensus cannot be reached, and there was opposition to going to a 24 months delay, then the proposed amendment shall be put to a vote. And if that proposed amendment is accepted, then that amended proposal should supersede the original proposal. And then we would vote on the amended proposal. So that is our interpretation of the rules. So I hope that helps to clarify things for you. But I see the United States asking for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the United States here is still confused why it is a procedural vote. And if you could clarify why, under that rule, this is considered procedural rather than an amendment to narrow the scope.
Thank you, and we'll just clarify that. So thank you, United States, and we are discussing it. We need to get this right. We understand that. And as a point was raised by Canada and the chair of the Standing Committee, we wonder if, as chair of the Standing Committee, you would be willing to provide your understanding of what was agreed there and subsequently what we adopted. That would be helpful for us. Thank you. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and I do appreciate that we are in new territory, so I will try to be clear based on my understanding. So firstly, Chair, I, like you, have heard a proposed amendment from Bolivia and Brazil, and I have heard opposition to that amendment from Canada and the United Kingdom. So the amendments to Rule 25.5 that were adopted in plenary are to deal specifically for when an amendment to reduce the scope of a proposal is presented. As you read, Chair, it says that if consensus cannot be reached, such as the case here, the proposed amendment shall be put to a vote. So it is my understanding that the first step we need to take is to determine whether or not to accept the amendment proposed by Bolivia and Brazil to reduce the scope by adding a 24-month delay. I would further agree with the United States that we understand this to be a substantive decision requiring a 2/3 majority to pass. That is my understanding of the tenor of the discussions we had when the Standing Committee considered changes to the rules of procedure. I hope that was clear. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Standing Committee. That's very helpful. As you say, it's uncharted territory, so we want to get it right. I noticed Mexico has asked for the floor, but before going to Mexico, maybe Secretariat, you want to just provide your perspective also?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for taking the time to make sure that the committee share the same understanding. We are applying now the new amended Rule 25.5 that is in the summary record of the CoP19 plenary, number 1, and that add the part mentioned by the chair of the standing committee. We understand that this is a substantive issue. It's just asking the committee to decide on the proposed amendment to the original proposal. There is not a procedural matter here. Is that just you should decide first on the proposal as amended, and if the proposed amended proposal is accepted, the amended proposal shall supersede the original proposal for amendment of Appendix 1 or 2. I hope that clarifies a little bit the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. Mexico has been waiting patiently for the floor, so I give the floor to you.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Creo que nuestra interpretación con los cambios a la regla 25.5 indican que hay una propuesta original. Se ha hecho una propuesta de enmienda para incluir el concepto temporal, como lo hicieron Bolivia y Brasil. Consideramos que no procede un voto de procedimiento, sino pasar directamente, aplicando las reglas actuales, a votar primero la de menor impacto y después la otra. Claramente no va a haber consenso si se proponen cambios de sustancia en una propuesta de enmienda. Eso es entrar a discusiones de sustancia. Por lo tanto, sugerimos proceder directamente a votar la propuesta enmendada y, en su caso, después la siguiente. Así no entramos a discusiones de sustancia. No vemos la necesidad de un voto procedimental para decidir el orden. El orden ya está establecido claramente en la regla 25.5. Gracias.
So we're just doing a few more consultations. As I say, we want to get this right because this is the first time, in this committee anyway, where we've trying to make sure that we are interpreting the amended version of 25.5 for this COP, and we'll come back shortly when we're absolutely certain. I do recognize parties waiting for the floor, but if you could just wait a few moments, or... So just to kind of continue with this, we'll again request the Standing Committee Chair if she could just provide clarity and the way forward. I recognize I have Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia all waiting very patiently, and I have seen you, and I'll give you the floor shortly, but first I invite the Standing Committee Chair to explain things to us again once more. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the parties for your patience as we work through this. I would also perhaps draw attention to the guidance materials that were prepared by the Standing Committee to support understanding of these changes to the rules of procedure. That might also offer some insight. I will first say that it was the view of the committee that the issues we are discussing are not procedural. So we are only discussing substantive matters with respect to our conversations on Rule 25.5 and 25.6. The change in Rule 25.5 that was agreed at the plenary session of this Conference of the Parties is meant to allow for a stepwise approach when there are proposals to reduce the scope of a proposal to amend the appendices, as is the case here. So the stepwise approach would first have the committee considering any amendments to reduce the scope of a proposal. And we have one on the table, as has been noted by our colleague from Mexico. Once the committee makes the decision on whether or not to accept the amendment to the proposal, it moves to the next step of agreeing the proposal. If the amendment that was proposed to reduce the scope is agreed by the committee, then the next step would be to agree the proposal as amended. However, if the committee does not accept the amendment to reduce the scope of the proposal, then it would move on to decision of the original proposal. So it is a two-step process that was envisioned so that parties can very deliberately indicate whether or not they wish to accept an amendment to reduce the scope of the proposal. In my view, Chair, what would be happening here is that, based on the lack of consensus, we would first put to a vote whether or not to accept the amendment to reduce the scope of the proposal, with a yes vote being acceptance and a no vote being rejection of that amendment. We would view that to be a 2/3 majority required for acceptance because it is a substantive matter. If that 2/3 majority is reached, then the proposal is considered amended by this committee and it supersedes the original proposal, and we would expect a second decision on then whether to accept that amended proposal or not. I see some nodding up there, so I hope I've been helpful, and I'm happy to continue to try to explain our very complex discussions over the past few years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Standing Committee Chair. That was very clear and very helpful, and we are very grateful for your guidance. I will now give the floor to Mexico, followed by Brazil and Colombia, and I thank you all for your patience. Mexico.
Gracias, señor presidente. Creo que la enmienda que se aceptó en la regla 5.5 no es lo suficientemente clara, porque la inserción dice en inglés, if consensus cannot be reached, then the proposed amendment shall be put to a vote. En el caso de que la enmienda hubiese sido aceptada por todos, en lugar de tener dos propuestas, solamente tendríamos una en la mesa. como hay opiniones distintas, tenemos dos. Y lo que procede es tratar en voto directamente la de menos restrictiva y luego la otra. El votar si se quiere o no votar por la propuesta con la enmienda, consideramos que no es balanceado porque ya hay una decisión sobre la sustancia. Entonces, reiteramos que nuestra sugerencia es, tenemos dos propuestas en la mesa en este momento y hay que proceder de acuerdo con el reglamento con la menos restrictiva y en su caso después con la original. Gracias.
Thank you, Mexico, but I think that is what we're doing. We're looking at an amendment which is less restrictive, and we are making a decision on whether to accept that amendment or not. And then, if we have accepted the amendment, we then go on to vote on it. In effect, as the superseded, that supersedes the original proposal, but we still have to make the second vote, the two-step process described by the chair of the Standing Committee. So, so I understand your point, but I think this is the process that the rule sets out as it's described, but it is a substantive vote, as the chair from the Standing Committee reminded us after the United States had raised the question. I give the floor now to Brazil, followed by Colombia, and then hopefully we can move on to make a decision on this. So Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the efforts we all are making to clearly understand the new rule of procedure that has been adopted. It's really important that we do not create precedents that would be problematic in the future. And we thank the chair of the Standing Committee for the explanation. I do think that the best way to move forward should be to vote only, a vote with the scope limited to the amendment proposed. And if the amendment is proposed, then the next step, if the amendment is adopted, the next step is to vote on the whole proposal amended. And I need to explain that for Brazil, we still do not support the proposal amended or not. The only thing is that if approved, we would suggest, we would prefer it to be as with the amendment. So we cannot vote in the first step cannot be to vote the whole proposal amended. So the idea is to vote our idea, and I think that's your idea also, Mr. Chair, to vote, to limit the first vote to the approval or not of the amendment, and then we move further to the whole proposal amended or not, depending on the decision. I would finally, I would like to ask for a clarification. Did we have consensus on the same amendment on proposal 48? Because I don't remember, we didn't have this discussion there. Thank you.
So thank you, Brazil. And we agree with the steps you outlined. And clearly, parties might decide to vote for an amended proposal, but then once it's amended, still vote against it. They have the right to vote any way they please, and a vote for an amendment doesn't imply a vote for an amended proposal, if you understand that. So you raised a question about the previous proposal. And my understanding, and the way I read the room, is that there was consensus on the amendment originally proposed for the 24-month delay. It was accepted by the proponents, nobody spoke against it. On this occasion, we did have, I think, 2 parties that spoke against the amendment. So that's the difference. So I think we did the correct thing on the previous proposal. I think we are now about to do the correct thing here. So thank you. If we have a kind of common understanding. I have Colombia. You've been waiting also very patiently, and then the United Kingdom. So Colombia, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Solo quisiéramos aclarar y agradecer las discusiones que se están dando y confirmar que por parte de los coproponentes estamos de acuerdo con enmendar nuestra propuesta en un retraso de la entrada en vigor de 24 meses. Gracias.
Okay, thank you, Colombia. But whether the co-proponents agree or not, there wasn't consensus in the room, which is why we're in the position we are now. But I go to the United Kingdom. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We don't want to complicate matters on the proposal at hand, and we agree with the way set forward. We'd just like to put on the record that we did disagree with the last one, so we might need to revisit the last proposal, subject to the process taken on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, UK, and we'll note that on the record. And yes, of course, you're free to raise things in plenary if you wish, later stage. So, right, I now have 3 more requests from the floor. So if we could maybe deal with these and then move on to actually making a decision under Rule 25.5. So European Union, followed by the United States, followed by Bolivia. So EU.
Thank you, Chair. And if I understand all this complicated matter right, all votes that are going to be taken are on substantive matters, which means that in that case, the EU casts the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union, and thank you for clarifying that. United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The U.S., in reaction to the UK's comments on the previous proposal, wishes to note for the record that Rule 24.2 allows the proponents to amend the scope of the proposal. And so we didn't need to go to a vote on the amended one, because the proponents can amend the proposal at any point. We just want to get these rules of procedure right that we adopted, so we would like that noted. And if someone wishes to raise diptychs in plenary, it is not because we didn't follow the rules properly. Thank you.
And that means we don't need to vote on whether to accept the amendment.
Thank you, United States, and we will record your intervention, and thank you for that comment. Bolivia, final request from parties, and then not the final request, New Zealand. So Bolivia, then New Zealand, and hopefully we can then maybe move on. Bolivia, you have the floor.
Muy buenos días nuevamente. Agradecerle, señor presidente, por cedernos la palabra. Y lo único que quería advertir era que se sigue el procedimiento de repente de la anterior propuesta, la 48, ya que uno de los proponentes, que en este caso es Colombia, está de acuerdo en aceptar la enmienda. Entonces solicitaría que los proponentes se reúnan, lo que vendría a ser Colombia, Unión Europea y Panamá, y de repente para la tarde tengamos de repente un consenso entre los proponentes de la misma forma que se dio en la propuesta 48. Gracias.
So thank you for that comment. I think we've only heard from one proponent, and there were the European Union and Panama as well, and I don't know what their position is. But I'll give the floor to New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from the United States intervention, I believe the proponents have agreed to a 24-month delay in the implementation, and so are effectively amending their proposal, and therefore I don't feel as though we need that 2 votes. We just simply vote on the amended proposal that the proponents agreed to.
So I'll give the floor to Panama, and then again we'll try to move on. Panama, you have the floor.
Sorry about that, President. Thank you. So yeah, we agree with what New Zealand just said. As Colombia said, the co-proponents are okay with the amendment, so it will be just 1 vote. If the co-proponents were not okay with the amendments, then I believe it will be 2 votes. That's our understanding. Yeah, from hearing from the parties and from the Secretariat.
Okay, Panama, then the European Union has requested the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and it seems we could simplify the procedure because all co-proponents would amend the proposal with 24-month delay.
Okay, so under Rule 24.2, we've now got an agreement from all the co-proponents to move to a 24-month delay. And that perhaps satisfies some of the objections to this proposal. And so we could, if need be, move to a vote just on the proposal as amended by the co-proponents. However, just turning to those parties that have the greatest concerns about it, would you be willing to live with this as consensus, or would any parties still really want to take it to a vote? So I just throw that out now, given the kind of discussion that we've had. But if there is still no consensus, then it will be a more straightforward voting procedure for our proposal as amended by the co-proponents. I'm not seeing any requests on the floor, so I'm going to take silence that we have accepted this proposal as amended by the proponents, and the amendment is that the entry into effect of the inclusion in Appendix 2 is delayed by 24 months. Clearly we've had quite a long and quite an instructive debate on paragraph 25.5 of the Rules of Procedure. I think it will stand us in good stead for the future. But I see, Israel, you're requesting the floor.
Yes, we would like to interrupt you on a point of order. From our understanding, you had called for a vote. And once you call for a vote, there was discussion on that vote, and the vote should have taken place. It's unclear to us why the vote was withdrawn or stopped, and we would, as a point of order, wish to go back to the point where the vote was being called already.
So I understand the point you're making, Israel, but I'm not sure that there is much advantage, really. There is consensus in the room, and I think it's better that we all move forward in this. I can't remember my precise wording from however long ago it was, whether I said I had started the voting procedure or just talked about my intention to take it to a vote. And I would probably need someone to look through the text of all the debate that we've been having here. But I don't think there's anything served by taking something to a vote now on which there is a consensus in the room. So unless there's any further objections, I think we can close the debate on Proposal 43. And thank you all for your consideration and the discussion that we've had on this topic. Sort out my papers, if you give me a moment. And if I said 43 inadvertently, then that was a mistake and it was meant to be Proposal 44. So on our agenda for today, we will now move on to Proposal 46, which is on Aphzelia, pod mahoganies, and a range of proponents: Benin, Côte d'Ivoire, the European Union, Liberia, and Senegal. And I invite one of the proponents to introduce the proposal. I have a request from Brazil. Oh, sorry, you have a point here.
Order. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. It's not clear for us. We were discussing Proposal 44, and we understood that the proponents agreed with the amendment, but we did not vote on the proposal amended itself. Because we do not support the proposal.
So I understand that. As I was wrapping up, I was saying if there are any objections to adopting the proposal with the as amended by the co-proponents. And I didn't see any requests from the floor. I did wait for quite a while. And on that basis, it seemed to me that consensus had been reached. Brazil, you want the floor again, and then Panama?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. We have expressed previously that we would not support the proposal if amended. We were waiting for you to open the vote on the proposal amended. I'm sorry, but it's not fair.
I see a request from the floor from Panama. I'll take that, and intervention from Panama, and then I'll come back, Brazil, to your point, and we will try to make sure that we're going forward collectively and try to avoid any misunderstanding. But Panama, you have the floor, then I will try and resolve the issue. Thank you.
Gracias, presidente. Creo que las reglas son claras. Tuvimos una gran discusión sobre las reglas de cómo votar en cuanto a esto. Y como bien lo dijo usted hace un ratito, se dio un tiempo para que se someta a votar si alguien no estaba de acuerdo con lo que habíamos acordado, y nadie pidió la palabra, por lo que creemos que este punto debe ser cerrado.
Okay, I thought I was clear in what I was saying, but perhaps it is now also clear that people took a different interpretation of what I was trying to say. I was asking that as the proposal had been amended by the co-proponents, which would have been under Rule 24.2, I was then asking if there were any objections to adopting that, given that it perhaps met some, if not all, of the concerns of parties that were not in favor originally of the proposal. However, clearly both you, Brazil, and Israel thought that you were waiting for a vote. And I think probably to sort out this situation, the best thing now is to put it to a vote. And clearly, maybe I should have done things better first time round, and it's taken us quite a long time to find our way through that. But I think probably that's the only way to resolve this issue now and make sure that we avoid complications later on. So if parties are willing to do that, then I think that is the best way forward. And it's been a long, complicated debate. It's been an instructive debate. I think we've probably all learned a few things about how the new rules of procedure are to be applied, and that will hopefully stand us in good stead. So, I will continue, and I will begin the voting procedure. So this is a vote for proposal number 44 as amended, and the amendment reads, as I said before, that the entry into effect of the inclusion in Appendix 2 is delayed by 24 months. This is a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. This is a substantive matter that requires a 2/3 majority to pass. And with that, I'm just going to check with the technicians that all the settings are correct. And while the technicians are checking things, just a reminder, we're going to a vote. So for all delegates to be seated, for no observers to be in the area reserved for delegates. And I see people walking around, and please, once the vote is underway, no one will be allowed in or out of the delegates area. No photographs of the delegates area during the vote, but you can, of course, vote afterwards. So please take your seats and make sure you're ready for the vote. And I've got a thumbs up from the technicians, so we're ready to go. So just to remind parties, if you vote yes, you're voting in favor of the proposal as amended. If you vote no, you're voting against it. You have 40 seconds to cast your vote, and the ballot is open now. Thank you. Technicians, if you could display the results of the vote on the screen, please. And if you can show the individual votes of parties on the screen now also. So I think we've all seen the result based on the percentage, and clearly there was more than a 2/3 majority, and so proposal 44 is recommended for adoption with the amendment as read out. So we now move on to the next item on our agenda, which is proposal 46. Aphelia species, and the proponents are Benin, Côte d'Ivoire, European Union, Liberia, and Senegal. So I invite one of them to Israel, do you want to take the floor again, or is it on this item or the previous one still?
I apologize again for interrupting with a point of order, but from what we heard for the last half hour, very clearly explained by the Standing Committee Chair and by yourself, was that the first round would be whether to approve or not approve making an amendment to the proposal, and then there would be a second round on the actual proposal. So we did the first round on whether to accept the amendment or not. That, as you said, passed. Now we are expecting a vote on the proposal as it was originally proposed. And we haven't voted on the proposal yet. We've only voted on whether to accept an amendment to the proposal or not. And we're expecting now a vote on the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
I thought I was clear again, but all the co-proponents supported an amendment. They agreed to amend the proposal under Rule 24.2, and therefore they have the right to do that as proponents, and the proposal was amended. So we then voted on the substance of that proposal, whether we adopt it or not. I thought I made that clear. So that was the vote. We don't need, in this occasion, to go to a second vote because we're not doing this under Rule 25.5, but the amendment was under Rule 24.2. So that is the approach that we took, and that, therefore, is why we have the decision that I read out. But Japan, you have also requested the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Japan also echoed our distinguished delegation from Israel. It was not clear for voting what. I mean, so that voting, we thought that so voting for, we are accept or not amendment for proposal. Thank you.
Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente, y espero que con estos minutos podamos ahorrar tiempo en el futuro. Nuestra interpretación de la regla 25.5 enmendada, la inserción nueva dice, si no se puede llegar a consenso cuando se hace una propuesta de enmienda, entonces deben de ser puestas a voto. Es decir, tratando con peras y manzanas, tenemos una propuesta original. Otras partes proponen una enmienda. Si hay consenso, y aquí hay que tener mucho cuidado cómo se interpreta la palabra consenso en la regla 25.5, es que en lugar de dos propuestas, solo hay una enmendada. Si no hay consenso, entonces tenemos dos propuestas donde la de menor impacto se vota primero y luego la segunda. No veo la necesidad de votar si la Asamblea acepta o no una propuesta de enmienda. ¿Sí? Estaríamos haciendo 3 votos. Uno, si se acepta o no que tengamos 2 propuestas. Luego otro para la propuesta 1 y luego para la propuesta 2. Y ahí no hay un balance, no hay equidad. Lo correcto, nuestra interpretación de lo que sucedió en este momento es que de acuerdo con la regla 25.5, sí hubo consenso en tener solamente una propuesta en la mesa y esta fue votada en su sustancia y aprobada por una mayoría de 2/3. Me parece que el distinguido delegado de Israel interpretó mal la votación pensando, y eso fue lo que creó la confusión, que se iba a votar por si tendríamos una o 2 propuestas en la mesa. Creo que necesitamos tener claridad en esta propuesta. Los proponentes, de acuerdo con la regla 24.2, enmendaron su propuesta original de manera que sí hubo consenso con la propuesta de Brasil y Bolivia, de tal suerte que solo hubo una propuesta enmendada en la mesa. Nuestra sugerencia es que si después del debate no hay consenso, se dé por hecho que hay 2 propuestas y se proceda en el orden de su ámbito a su votación directamente y que no es necesario poner a voto si el comité está de acuerdo en que hay una propuesta enmendada o no, porque los países tienen su derecho de proponer las enmiendas. Gracias.
Thank you, Mexico. We'll come back, but we've got a request from the European Union again. So, European Union, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and we understand the difficulties of the discussion and the need to be clear on this, but as the delegation from Mexico recalled just now, the proponents have supported unanimously a reduced an amended proposal. So the original proposal does not exist anymore, it's not on the table. So we are operating under Rule 24.2, which allows parties, proponents, to amend their proposal to reduce its scope at any point in time. And it was clear from the interventions from all the proponents that this was the case. And therefore, there are no two proposals anymore. There's only one proposal, which is the amended one, which is for consideration of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union, and that was also the point I was trying to make. The proposal had, under Rule 24.2, any party has the right at any time to withdraw or amend a proposal to reduce its scope, and I heard from all the co-proponents that they were happy to do so, and therefore the original proposal, as you said, no longer existed. So it's just one vote on the proposal. I thought I had made that clear. I will try to be more clear in future, but I think the result as it remains as it stands. And with your indulgence, it would be quite useful to move on. Thank you, colleagues, for your cooperation. It has been a long discussion, but hopefully it helps to clarify the way forward if or when these issues emerge in future. So with that, I would like to go back to Proposal 46 and invite, for a final time, I hope, the proponents to introduce it. One of them going to request the floor. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We're glad to present to you Proposal 46 for the inclusion of African populations of the genus Afzelia in Appendix 2. Firstly, we would like to thank the co-proponents, Côte d'Ivoire, Benin, Liberia, and Senegal for their contribution and support. Afzelia is a genus of large paleotropical trees that are widespread across sub-Saharan Africa. The timber is of high quality, being durable in humid conditions and termite resistant, and is sought after for many purposes, also due to its aesthetic quality. Afzelia timber is traded internationally as Ducie or African mahogany. Afzelia species are known to be intensively logged and threatened by overexploitation for the international timber trade. This has led to severe population declines and scarcity of mature sea trees, as noted now during several African regional meetings. The EU is one of the key importers of Afzelia timber, which is mainly exported from Western and Central Africa. Trade data indicates that 15,000 tons of African mahogany has been exported between 2008 and 2014. Accordingly, 4 species, namely Afzelia africana, Pipinensis, Pachyloba, and Quazensis, meet the criteria for listing in Appendix 2 under Criterion B of Annex 2A of Conference Resolution 9.24. Also, since African Afzelia species are not easily distinguishable from one another based on wood morphological characteristics, and the species are known to be traded interchangeably, inclusion of all other African populations of the genus in Appendix 2 under Criterion A of Annex 2B of Resolution of Conference 9.24 is proposed. This would include a further 3 species. We therefore invite parties to support the adoption of Proposal 46 to include the genus Afzelia in Appendix 2 with annotation number 17, which designate all timber commodities, including logs, sawnwood, veneer sheets, plywood, and transformed wood. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I open the floor for parties to comment. I see Benin, but just to begin with, I'd like to hear from countries that are not co-proponents. So I see Central African Republic, followed by Burkina Faso and Cameroon. You have the floor, Central African Republic.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de m'avoir passé la parole. C'est pour la première fois que la République centrafricaine intervient dans ce comité. Nous remercions la République du Panama et le secrétariat de la CITES pour cette organisation réussie de cette conférence et félicitons également votre nomination à la tête de ce comité. Monsieur le Président, il y a lieu de rappeler qu'à la différence de certains pays africains, où l'exploitation forestière est une menace à la disparition des espèces d'Afzelia espèces, selon le rapport de l'Union européenne, la République centrafricaine est l'un des pays les plus boisés du bassin du Congo, avec environ 28 300 000 hectares de forêt, dont 9 250 000 hectares de forêt fermée, soit près de 15% du territoire national. Dans le secteur soudano-guinéen, qui couvre plus de 80% du territoire national, les espèces d'Afzelia sont abondantes et disséminées. L'exploitation forestière, pourvoyeuse d'emplois et de recettes à l'État, est soumise à un permis d'exploitation et d'aménagement et à une convention d'aménagement entre l'État et l'exploitant forestier. Ce mécanisme constitue une mesure rigoureuse de gestion durable et pérenne des ressources forestières. En outre, la République centrafricaine a signé également un accord de partenariat volontaire, l'APV, FLEG, juridiquement contraignant avec l'Union européenne pour garantir que le bois et les produits dérivés exportés vers l'Union européenne soient d'origine légale. D'après également les inventaires de 2018 à 2022, les espèces d'Afzelia sont abondantes en volume exploitable, soit 92 248 mètres cubes. À cet effet, Monsieur le Président, pour la République centrafricaine, la menace de disparition des espèces d'Afzelia est faible et ne pourrait être inscrit à l'annexe 2. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Central African Republic. I give the floor to Cameroon, then Benin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de me passer la parole et je profite encore de cette occasion qui m'est offerte pour vous adresser une fois de plus mes félicitations pour la manière avec laquelle vous conduisez les travaux de ce comité. De même, cette occasion m'offre la possibilité de présenter globalement la position du Cameroun sur les 3 propositions soumises par les mêmes co-auteurs sur les genres Afzelia, Pterocarpus et Kaya. Je reviendrai sur les détails pour les autres espèces après. Le Cameroun est un État partie de l'aide de répartition des distributions des genres qui sont proposées à l'inscription à l'annexe 2 de la CITES ce jour. En rapport avec la résolution 9.4, REV 17, nous avons émis quelques réserves sur le respect scrupuleux des lignes directrices pour ce qui est de la robustesse des données scientifiques utilisées pour soutenir la proposition d'amendement. Présentement, le commerce international ne constitue pas encore dans notre pays une cause de vulnérabilité de ces espèces. Au niveau du Cameroun, le dispositif normatif établi tant au niveau technique que juridique nous permet encore de bien suivre ces essences. Nous précisons que les prélèvements se font dans les concessions forestières, toutes détentrices d'un plan d'aménagement. Chaque année, les inventaires forestiers dans l'assiette de coupe annuelle sont réalisés et à un taux de sondage de 100%. Très récemment, le Cameroun a développé un système d'information de gestion forestière de 2e génération, CGIF2, qui est un outil de gestion durable des forêts et qui nous a permis d'asseoir un mécanisme de traçabilité des prélèvements et de la production. Certaines de nos entreprises forestières sont certifiées, ce qui constitue une preuve de leur sérieux. En s'appuyant sur l'analyse préliminaire du potentiel actuel sur pied, ainsi que du niveau de vulnérabilité des essences concernées dans les forêts de production, le Cameroun dispose encore d'un potentiel important sur pied des essences visées, avec des peuplements en équilibre à régénération constante. Le rythme actuel de prélèvement dans les forêts aménagées est en corrélation directe avec les effectifs et les structures de peuplement de dites espèces ne sauraient être préjudiciables à leur survie, notamment en zone de forêt dense humide. Aussi, il faut noter que les genres concernés regroupent une quinzaine d'espèces dont le suivi n'est sûrement pas garanti par cette inscription, à moins que les initiateurs de celle-ci ne soient en défaveur du commerce international des espèces d'arbres forestiers. Nous avons des difficultés auxquelles nous faisons déjà face pour les essences actuellement inscrites à l'annexe 2. C'est fort de ce qui précède que le Cameroun suggère que des études approfondies soient menées afin d'obtenir des informations complémentaires. Pour ce qui est du genre Pterocarpus, le Cameroun soutient la proposition d'inscription seulement de l'espèce Pterocarpus erinaceus, c'est-à-dire le COSO, à l'annexe 2, au regard du caractère transfrontalier de coupe dont cette espèce fait l'objet. Par contre, en ce qui concerne les genres Afzelia et Kaya, au regard des arguments développés ci-dessus et des éléments pertinents partagés aussi bien avec l'initiateur principal de cette proposition qu'avec la Commission des forêts d'Afrique centrale, COMIFAC, et même certains États ici présents, le Cameroun n'est pas favorable à l'inscription en bloc du genre Afzelia et Kaya à l'annexe 2 de la CITES. Nous suggérons, en interpellant la prudence et la précaution, Monsieur le Président, qu'il vous plaise d'envisager la mise sur pied d'un groupe de travail pour mieux apprécier cette proposition. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Cameroon. I give the floor to Benin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. À notre prise de parole, nous tenons quand même à vous dire merci par rapport à la manière dont vous dirigez les débats et nous sommes rassurés que cette COP permettra d'avoir de très bons résultats. Le Bénin, en tant que co-auteur, soutient l'inclusion du genre Afzelia à l'annexe 2, étant donné les difficultés actuelles pour différencier les différentes espèces de bois et compte tenu de l'importance de la demande au niveau du commerce international. Déjà, à cause de la surexploitation et le fait que le genre Afzelia a une croissance lente et une haute mortalité en pépinière, le Bénin a été convaincu pour inscrire le genre Afzelia dans la catégorie 1 de sa législation et a donc peur que l'absence de la réglementation au niveau international ne compromette les efforts de conservation. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Benin. I'll give the floor now to Gabon, followed by Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, le Gabon sera bref dans son intervention. Tout comme le Cameroun, nous ne soutenons pas cette proposition, car au niveau du Gabon, les espèces d'Afzelia ne sont pas menacées par le commerce international. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Gabon, and for your brevity. I give the floor to the Congo and then Senegal. Congo, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Toutes mes félicitations la manière que vous êtes en train de conduire les travaux. La République du Congo a signé un accord de partenariat volontaire avec l'Union européenne dans le cadre de la PVFLECT, Forest Law Enforcement, Governance and Trade. Et je pense que le Congo est un modèle en matière d'aménagement des forêts. Nous avons plus de 50% des forêts certifiées et plus de, je crois, 50% des forêts aménagées. Et donc, en matière de gestion durable des ressources forestières en République du Congo, il n'y a pas de doute, et ça, l'Union européenne le sait. Et donc, de ce point de vue, nous ne soutenons pas cette position parce que pour ce qui concerne ces essences, ces espèces, nous en avons en abondance et nous faisons de l'exploitation responsable où nous n'avons besoin que d'un pied à l'hectare et donc c'est une prouesse et le taux de déforestation en République du Congo est de 0,06%. Et donc, de ce point de vue, je pense que le Congo ne soutient pas cette position. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. The Congo, I think I'd said I'd take Senegal next, to be followed by Burkina Faso, China, and Uganda. Senegal.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Donc, le Sénégal n'est pas un pays de forêt. On n'exporte pas le bois à l'exportation au niveau international, mais on a ces espèces que nous utilisons de manière locale, interne. Donc, le genre Afzelia est bien présent au Sénégal. Donc, nous soutenons vraiment cette proposition pour la simple raison que l'inscription en annexe 2 n'est pas synonyme de restriction. L'inscription en annexe 2 permet de suivre la ressource de manière scientifique, avoir les données nécessaires pour assurer la durabilité, la traçabilité et la légalité. Donc, ce n'est pas un problème pour nous. Ça invite plutôt davantage à mieux connaître la ressource. Et le commerce continue. Nous soutenons vraiment cette proposition de la manière la plus ferme. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Senegal, Burkina Faso, then China and Uganda.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Étant donné que c'est la première fois que le Burkina Faso intervient à ce comité, nous voudrions bien vous féliciter de votre élection à la présidence de ce comité et également à la bonne conduite des travaux. Nous félicitons également et remercions le Panama pour l'organisation de cette conférence et également l'accueil chaleureux dont nous avons pu bénéficier jusque-là. Monsieur le Président, le Burkina Faso fait partie des États de l'aire de répartition du genre Afzelia et Kaya. C'est une espèce qui fait l'objet de beaucoup de pression au niveau du Burkina Faso, ce qui a valu son inscription à la liste des espèces intégralement protégées au niveau de la loi nationale. Et nous pensons que l'inscription de ce genre à l'annexe 2 favorisera beaucoup plus une meilleure conservation de ces espèces. C'est pour cela que le Burkina Faso soutient la proposition faite par la Côte d'Ivoire et les autres co-auteurs de. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Burkina Faso. I give the floor to China, then Uganda, then Côte d'Ivoire. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. China noted that this proposal will involve many range states of the African populations of the Afzelia species. We suggest that the views of all range states on this proposal should be fully considered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China. I give the floor to Uganda.
Thank you very much, Chair. Uganda appreciates the proponents who brought this very critical issue to this gathering. And we wish to pronounce that Afzelia as a species does exist in Uganda and in the neighboring countries. And we have observed a lot of illegal transactions that are taking place with this very species, some of which comes from the neighboring countries. We have, through our enforcement operations, impounded so many consignments, and this can be evidenced when you go to our forestry yard. You will find a lot of this species collected there, and is threatening the existence of this species, even within Uganda itself. And therefore, Uganda as a range state is very, very much in support of listing these species so that the trade in it is well regulated so that we save it from extinction due to commercial purposes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Uganda. I give the floor to Côte d'Ivoire, followed by Kenya and Zambia. Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Côte d'Ivoire, en tant que co-auteur de cette proposition, attire l'attention de toutes les parties sur le niveau de déforestation marqué et toujours croissant en Afrique. Les espèces d'Afzelia souffrent également de la perte d'habitat et des effets du changement climatique. Il est indéniable qu'il y a une forte demande internationale pour cette espèce. La présente proposition vise à garantir sa gestion durable. Et la Côte d'Ivoire fait également remarquer les difficultés d'identification des produits de ces différentes espèces d'Afzelia dans le commerce. Nous encourageons donc toutes les parties présentes ici à soutenir cette proposition. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Côte d'Ivoire. I give the floor to Kenya, then Zambia.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Kenya commends the proponents of Proposal 46 and considers it appropriate for listing in Appendix 2 so that it can regulate trade and generate trade on how much the species is being traded. Yeah, we support the proposal.
Thank you, Kenya. So I now give the floor to Zambia, followed by Nigeria.
Thank you, Chair, for giving Zambia the floor. Considering that this is the first time we're speaking, we would like to take this opportunity to thank the host country for the warm hospitality and also congratulate you on your election as chair for this committee. Chair, Zambia supports the proposal to list Afzelia as outlined by the proponents, as we are a range state of this species, or should I say genus, and have also been affected by the illegal trade in this particular tree species. As such, we add our voice in support rather of its listing. Thank you.
Thank you, Zambia. I now give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Niger and the Comoros.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. I also want to join my voice, to support this proposal because the rate of deforestation is quickly eroding the population of this Afzelia. And so there's need to protect this species, from going into extinction. And so I also join my voice to support this proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. I now give the floor to Niger, and that's the final request from parties.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président. Pour prendre la parole pour la première fois dans cette salle, je vous félicite également pour la conduite de ces travaux au niveau du comité 1. Et nous remercions également, en tout cas, le peuple panaméen pour l'organisation de cette conférence. Par rapport à cette proposition, le Niger félicite non seulement les pays auteurs et co-auteurs, et leur apporte aussi son soutien. Merci bien, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Niger. I will open the floor if there's any interventions from observers. I've only one request from Jean Bleu. So you have the floor, but yeah, keep your intervention short, please. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole accordée. Nous aimerions apporter des informations scientifiques auprès des parties concernant l'espèce Afzelia. Nous constatons que pour la majorité des parties, le commerce d'une espèce ne permet pas de quantifier la diminution de la population de cette espèce. Par contre, nous avons réalisé une étude à travers nos projets de recherche sur la réduction de la population de cette espèce Afzelia bipenensis dans le futur, c'est-à-dire dans 100 ans. Ces simulations prennent en ligne de compte le niveau d'exploitation réalisé en Afrique centrale avec toutes les modalités, le diamètre minimum d'exploitation, le coefficient d'exploitabilité, le taux de dégâts, et ensuite en prenant également en compte la perte de l'habitat due à la déforestation en Afrique de l'Ouest et en Afrique de l'Est. Ces résultats nous montrent que dans 100 ans, la réduction de la population de cette espèce est de 3%. Suivant les critères de l'UCN, du critère A3, cette espèce n'est pas menacée puisque sa réduction de la population est de 3% inférieure aux 30%. Ces résultats proviennent des différents travaux de recherche financés par l'Union européenne, le Fonds français pour l'environnement mondial, la Belgique, l'Allemagne, à travers le programme de la promotion de la gestion durable des forêts en Afrique centrale. Nous aimerions vraiment que des parties tiennent en ligne de compte ces résultats. Merci.
Thank you, Jean Bleu. I have no further requests from the floor. You just give me a moment to check. Thank you, delegates. Just listening to that debate, we've had a range of views expressed, a lot of support coming from range states and some opposition too. It seems to me that probably the balance of the room is likely to be in favor of this proposal. But I do want to go back to those parties that express their opposition, and perhaps Central African Republic, Cameroon, Gabon and the Congo. Do you want to block consensus, or is this a proposal you could live with, understanding the points that you've made that, and which we have in the record, that you do have significant concerns about it? So if any of those parties in opposition would like to give me an indication about how strongly they feel, whether they could live with consensus or not, that would be of great assistance to me. Thank you. I see Cameroon, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Dans l'entame de notre propos et au cours de notre développement, nous avons proposé la mise en place d'un groupe de travail. Nous pensons que ceci peut faire l'objet d'un point de discussion. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Cameroon, and I noted that, but Central African Republic, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La République centrafricaine garde toujours sa position et propose également, s'il y a possibilité, un groupe de travail pour réfléchir une fois de plus sur cette proposition. Merci.
And Gabon, you have the floor, followed by the Congo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Gabon s'aligne aussi pour la constitution d'un groupe de travail, comme l'a souligné le Cameroun et la République centrafricaine.
And the Congo, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Comme l'a souligné mes prédécesseurs, le Congo, la RCA et le Cameroun, le Gabon aussi, je pense qu'il est de bonne loi qu'un groupe de travail soit mis en place. Je vous remercie.
So maybe now to, before finding a way forward, we could go back to the co-proponents. Having heard the debate and the comments from those most opposed, do you have a view on the way forward? So I invite any of the co-proponents to offer their reflections. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So we would firstly like to thank the previous speakers for their input and the range states for their mentioned efforts to protect the genus. We would like to reiterate that indeed the species has a favorable status in some countries, but not in all. There's a lot of decline in Australia and many of the range states as a result of international trade. Also, Senegal pointed out already that Appendix 2 listing would not prevent all trade in Aphelia species, and it can still occur where it is sustainable and non-detriment findings are possible. We would also like to point out that all range states were consulted in April and September of 2021, and their responses can be found in the proposal. We would also like to come back to the comments made by the University of Saint-Bleu, and we would like to ask them provide published information, a publication and a peer-reviewed publication. Thank you.
But do you have any reflections, European Union, on this suggestion for a working group? Do you see any value there? And you have the floor when you've had time to consider.
Thank you. We do not see the necessity to have a working group for this proposal, as there's enough support and, as I said, the criteria are met. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. And I also have any reservations as to whether a working group will achieve anything that can't be resolved today. Given that the 4 countries concerned maintain their opposition, I think the only way to resolve this is to go to a vote. So that is my intention, and that will hopefully be possible before we break for lunch. So we're now going to begin the voting procedure. And as before, I remind you all by now to please take your seats, to remain in them during the voting process, for all observers to be out of the delegates area. Just checking, we're still Secretariat staff. Please take your seats and make sure your voting cards are inserted. This is a vote for proposal number 46 on AFSILIA. It is a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. It's a substantive vote, so it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. And as before, a vote yes is a vote in favor of the proposal, a vote no is a vote against it. I'm just going to check with the technicians that everything is set up correctly.
Chair, the system is set up, but we still see some delegates who are moving.
So delegates, please remain in your seats. I remind you all of what I've said earlier about photography. So now that everything is set up, you now have 40 seconds to cast your vote, and the ballot is open now. Thank you, technicians. If you could now display the result of the vote on the screen. So clearly, this proposal is adopted, exceeding the 2/3 majority. But if technicians can now display individual votes on the screen so parties can check. So I think we've all had a chance to see. I think it's on its second cycle now. Before we close this session, in a moment I'll ask the Secretariat for any announcements, but just a reminder that when we resume at 2 p.m, we will be starting with fish proposals and proposal 37. So Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. There are 4 working groups meeting at lunchtime at 12:15 today. And as a reminder, the Budget Working Group will be discussing the language strategy in Pacifico 1. The action plan on gender-related matters is in Caribe 6. The role of CITES in reducing risk of zoonotic disease emergence is in ISTMO 1. And Sharks and Rays Working Group is meeting in ISTMO 2. All of these meetings starting at 12:15. Thank you, Chair.
And with that, the session is now closed. Thank you all for your cooperation on some difficult discussions. Thank you.